Should the Carolina Panthers be concerned about Mike Evans' age? And how does the salary cap increase impact J.C. Horn and his fifth-year option? I'll answer those questions on this Weekly Friday Mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays like today throughout the offseason, I'll be right here on the show answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. The best way to get those questions into me is by either adding me or DMing me on Twitter at Julian Council. But of course, follow me on Twitter first at Julian Council. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. We are back once with the Friday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers. And again, to my YouTube viewers, want to let you know I am here in Las Vegas for the truck race. My main job at NASCAR. The Wi-Fi is a little spotty. I'm seeing that right now. It says connection is unstable. So I apologize for that. As always, I record another feed in the background for the podcast listeners. If the feed is never great, just go listen to the podcast. It's very simple. You already told you, get your podcast where you listen to your podcast. But of course, I appreciate all the folks on YouTube who watch, and I apologize about streaming service. Kind of just the way things are. It gets in on the road, got to do the podcast, and well, sometimes the internet's not great, and there's not much I can do about it. So again, I apologize. But let's get into your weekly Friday mail questions right now here on the show. Starting off with Travis, who says, I want you to be the GM for this question. First, who would be your top three cut, trade, or extend players? Second, who would be your top three free agents to pick up? And last, who would be your 30th, 65th, and 101st picks in the draft? Now, we don't know if the Panthers are going to have the 101st pick in the NFL draft. We're not going to find out what exactly that pick in the fourth round is going to be until the compensatory picks are handed out across the league. Once that is found out, we'll know the Panthers have the first pick in the fourth round, which is the pick that they own, and it's probably going to be right there in the early 100s of the draft. So TBD on whether it's going to be 101 or not. But as far as my top three players to cut, trade, and extend, I'm just going to have my top three be to cut, to extend, and to trade for the Carolina Panthers. First guy to cut, very simply, Miles Sanders. Hated handing out the $11 million guaranteed to him last year, the 4-year deal. Panthers were the only team to hand out that sizable running back contract last offseason. And of course, they ended up being 2-15 and getting absolutely nothing out of Miles Sanders. I understood did it, looking for running back could do a little bit more for them than what D'Onta Foreman did a year ago, where he was basically a downhill runner, wasn't great in the pass game. They wanted someone who could get downhill, someone who could be also a pass catcher. And we saw Miles Sanders do that throughout his career in Philadelphia. He was coming off a Pro Bowl season. And of course, Deuce Staley was a running backs coach and assistant head coach, and they had experience together as Deuce Staley used to be the backs coach there in Philadelphia. It makes sense why the Panthers would target Miles Sanders, but it does not make sense in this day and age to pay a running back kind of like the Carolina Panthers paid Miles Sanders, especially a running back who's not Christian McCaffrey, one of the top tier. And it's not like they gave him Christian McCaffrey money. I'm vehemently opposed to paying running backs at all unless they truly are the special kind of player like a McCaffrey. But even when McCaffrey was here in Carolina, he was not the reason they won or the reason that they lost. The quarterback play was the reason why they won or lost. The offensive line play was the reason why they won or lost. The defensive line play was the reason why they won or lost, not the running back Christian McCaffrey, who I think is an outstanding player and wish was still here in Carolina. His 1,000th season, Panthers won 6 games. In 2020, when they barely had him out there, they won 5 games. Same case in 2021. It wasn't him making the difference for the Carolina Panthers. Could have helped, absolutely, but he was not what made them win or made them lose during his time in Carolina. And Brian Burns, obviously, this is a guy who The Athletic has as a number one free agent. This offseason, the free agency period coming up in about a week and a half or so. I think Brian Burns is an outstanding talent. Did not have the best year this past season. It happens. It's the lowest sack total since his rookie year, but he's been ascending. He's a two-time Pro Bowler. He's 25 years old. Already has 46 sacks right in the middle of his prime. And at the end of the deal that he likely signs, whether it's here in Carolina or elsewhere, he's still going to be under the age of 30, or you could get another decent contract. You could have Brian Burns here for the next 8 years and get a lot of quality play out of him. I think that's got to be the top guy for the Carolina Panthers to extend. And then trade, I think Burns would be probably who a lot of people would say, obviously, that you have to tag, then trade him. You're not going to get the same return that you would have gotten if you're the Carolina Panthers had they done it at the trade deadline in 2022. My trade guy it's weird. I don't really necessarily want them to do this. Now, I did put this on my offseason checklist because I was wondering whether this dude actually wanted to be here after last season and what he signed on for. That's Adam Thielen. At age 33, over 100 receptions, 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns. No one could have seen that coming. That's not last name Thielen or from his hometown in Minnesota, or just the biggest Adam Thielen fan in the world. The fact that he was able to put that up last season as being the number one guy, imagine if he goes somewhere else, a contender to be their number 3, maybe the Panthers could get something out of him, out of that as far as a trade. So that's just my top guy because I don't want to get rid of Burns. I don't want to get rid of Derek Brown. Adam Thielen, maybe there's something still there, even though I don't necessarily want the Panthers to do that. It's one of those things where they may have to if he goes up to them and says, hey, I want out. I don't want to be a part of this rebuild. I want to be somewhere where he can win. Dave Canales is going to sell him all the kind of positivity in the world. Is Adam Thielen going to buy it, or is he going to say, I want out? I don't know. I hope he sticks around. Free agents, my top 3 would be Mike Evans, because he's actually a free agent. The Bucs came out there. Jason Light, who is their general manager, said at the Combine earlier this week that he is a top priority for them. I would love Mike Evans in his career as a Buck. I'm kind of a sucker for those kind of things where guys stick around for the whole career. But hell, dude, we saw Tom Brady play in New England all those years and go to Tampa Bay to close out his career. It's not that big of a deal. We saw Cam Newton, an iconic Panther, go to New England at the end of his career. We saw Steve Smith go to Baltimore. We've seen Thomas Davis go to New York. It's not like something that doesn't happen on a regular. So I don't really think it matters all that much, but it is still cool to see that kind of, I don't even want to call it loyalty, but to see a guy stick around one franchise for the entirety of their career. But it's a business. And Mike Evans has an opportunity one final time to really get paid a ton of money. He's had 10 straight 1,000-yard receiving seasons, likely going to be a Hall of Famer. He's been an outstanding player, but he loves Dave Canales. And if the Panthers, who are in desperate need of wide receiver 1 and a guy who already knows the system and excelled in the system being an All-Pro last year, he wants to come here, sign me up for Mike Evans. So that's my top guy out there now that the Panthers, with T. Higgins, going to have to give up a ton of assets just to get him. Mike Evans, he comes free. Let's go get him. Noah Fant, he has experience with the Carolina Panthers' new tight end coach, Pat McPherson. I think of the 2 guys in Seattle that are free agent tight ends, him and Colby Parkinson. He provides a little bit more in the passing game. Didn't score a touchdown last year, just like his athleticism, more good run blocker. Would love to bring in Noah Fant as that tight end. And in the third, I think the Panthers need another receiver, but a guy who's got some twitch, somebody who can make some plays, can be used as a Swiss Army kind of type player. And this guy used to be a Carolina Panther, Curtis Samuel. Why not go out there and get him? There's players like Darnell Mooney who would make sense. Tyler Boyd is the guy who I thought also could be interesting as like a big lot player. But if you can have one out there, do you really need Tyler Boyd, who's going to be right there at 30 this season, who's not ever been at the level as Mike Evans? I don't know if you want to have those 3 old receivers potentially. But Curtis Samuel, still 27 years old, still got some speed, can be an above-average starter. Why not have a homecoming, bring him back to Carolina? They did it with Demir Berg, who was barely here because he had a hamstring pull. Why not Curtis Samuel? Those would be my top 3. The draft, Keon Coleman. I talked about him yesterday. Love Keon Coleman. Him or Troy Franklin, honestly, if they're there at 33, I would love to see that. Yes, even bringing in Mike Evans, Curtis Samuel. Panthers need a complete overall when it comes to the receiving core. You would add another young player. Curtis Samuel, he's not that old just yet. And you already have Jonathan Mingo. So you have a couple of guys that you could have for a couple of seasons, even way beyond that, if Coleman and Mingo are able to grow into those kind of 1 and 2 down the line in Carolina, while also having a veteran Mike Evans and a pass-catching tight end option in Noah Fant. The third guy the third round pick I'd be looking at is Braylon Trice, the edge rusher out of Washington. Where Burns stays or not, the Panthers to be looking for an edge rusher and looking for a guy who actually produced at the college level. We did not see that out of DJ Johnson. Braylon Trice did that, helped Washington get to the national championship game. That's a guy like in the third round. And then I think the Panthers need to go get a corner. We'll find out what happens with J.C. Horn and what happens with Dante Jackson. But just long term, the Panthers currently don't have anybody under contract at the corner spot past this upcoming season. Chris Abrams-Drain out of Mizzou is the guy I'll be looking at. He was excellent this past year. His defense has been really good under the former defense coordinator Blake Baker the last 2 seasons. I think that's somebody who could potentially, he's probably a day 2 pick, but maybe if he slides and he's around there at the beginning of day 3 in the 4th round, Chris Abrams-Drain, I think, can come in and actually really help the Carolina Panthers down the line, be that number 2 to J.C. Horn maybe if J.C. Horn sticks around. So that's I'm looking at as far as if I was the GM of the Carolina Panthers, who'd cut, who'd extend, who'd trade. Miles Sanders cut him, Brian Burns extend him, trade Adam Thielen, but reluctantly free agents, Mike Evans, Noah Fant, Chris Samuel, and then draft Keon Coleman / Troy Franklin, Braylon Trice in the 3rd round, Chris Abrams-Drain in the 4th round for the Carolina Panthers. So that's me playing general manager. But speaking of one of the guys that I talked about there, Mike Evans, one of the listeners is concerned if Mike Evans is worth the investment considering his age. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. The wait is almost over. North Carolina FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, is coming to our state on March 11th. We'll finally be able to bet on all our favorite teams and all our favorite sports with FanDuel. There's tons of ways for you to get in on the action. You can bet on everything from the money line to over-unders, which team will win this year's Tobacco Road rivalry, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, with live betting, you can even pick which player will put up the next bucket and the one after that. See for yourself why FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon so you can be the first to know when FanDuel goes live in North Carolina. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Back here on Locked On Panthers, the weekly Friday mailbag, either at me or in me to get questions for next week's edition of the show. Now over to Kurt, who says, is Mike Evans really someone the Panthers should go after? We would have 2 30-plus wide receivers as our top 2 receivers, both highly unlikely to make it to the end of Bryce's rookie deal with really only Mingo below them for development. Shouldn't we be focused on younger wide receivers that can develop with Bryce for the next 4 years for sure instead of another aging wide receiver despite the talent? Well, as far as the contract situations, well, Adam Thielen is only under contract for the next 2 seasons. So, yeah, he will not be here. He's not even under contract to be here through the entirety of Bryce Young's rookie season. I don't think at age 36 in the 4th year of Bryce Young's deal that the Panthers are going to be signing on for Adam Thielen. This year I don't know if it's going to be likely his last, but you would think it should be his last, just hopefully the Carolina Panthers go out there and actually bring in other talent. Now, if he produces again, fine, bring him back for an age 35 season. I want to see his role reduce. Like last year, okay, he's going to be your pseudo #1 with DJ Chark. Hopefully it works out. Hope we get something out of Mingo. It was a spectacular failure outside of what Adam Thielen produced. Now this year, go get some players who can bring him down on the depth chart. And if he produces again, go again, get some more guys to bring him down on the depth chart. You don't want Adam Thielen being one of your top guys as a wide receiver moving forward as you try to, like you say, Kurt, build around Bryce Young. Yeah, there can be some concerns about Mike Evans' age. He's already 30. He's going to be, I believe, 31 at this upcoming season. But he's had 10,000 seasons. That was pro. And if that's just durability, he played every game this past season in Tampa. The most games missed single season is 3 back in 2020 during the pandemic season. I'm not sure how many of those were due to injury or how many were they close contacts. A lot of guys who didn't even have COVID because maybe they didn't get vaccinated, or if they were vaccinated, it didn't matter. Like a lot of times they had to sit out just because of just the close contact and the COVID protocols the NFL had. So I don't remember whether that was a reason or not for Mike Evans, but still only 3 games missed. You'll take that. If he's going to give you 14 games compared to what you've gotten from a lot of the guys and the health issues the Panthers have had over the last season, I'm taking that. I think the relationship that he has with Dave Canales, that is something that is important for the Carolina Panthers. The fact that he still has the talent and the speed to be able to do what he's been able to do for the last decade. I don't think you say no to Mike Evans just because, okay, he's 30. I understand kind of where you're coming from, and that once you get past that threshold, you start to dip down. Hope is you sign him to kind of a 3-year deal, which is really like a 1 or a 2-year deal, probably a 2-year deal because of just what he's in the past, and you can get the most out of him. while also, like, for that first year especially, but even that second year, you're hoping that younger guys like Mingo, if you draft somebody, can come up and can start to produce. And you can see, okay, once Mike is gone, Jonathan Mingo, have Troy Franklin, or you have Keon Coleman, you have A.D. Mitchell, who are those young guys. And I think getting a middle-aged veteran like a Curtis Samuel or Darnell Mooney also can help the transition for the Carolina Panthers, as far as like trying to have somebody who can be there with Bryce Young and they're not too old at that point in time. So yeah, there should be any sort of concern about a player who's up in that age. But the fact that he hasn't really dealt with significant injuries, and knock on wood there, that also makes it far more palatable than if he was somebody who had been banged up, had put up numbers, had been banged up throughout his career. That's not really been the case with Mike Evans. So I'm not super concerned, but I do understand where you're coming from there, Kurt. Over to Andy now, who says, does the big increase in salary cap change your thinking at all on picking up J.C. Horn's fifth-year option? My thinking is that when he's a down corner, which usually costs around $18-20 million a year, and so at $11 million, he's a steal if he stays healthy. I know that's a big if, but with the extra cap money, I think that may be the bet worth taking. Yeah, this kind of, and I understand what I'm saying here. I'm not comparing the two players as far as what their talent is, as far as their production. But think back to when the Carolina Panthers traded the second, fourth, and sixth round pick for Sam Darnold, and then decided to pick up his fifth-year option that was $18 million. Now, when you look at that first year, his fourth year in the NFL is $4 million, and then the 18, you put it together, that's $22 million. So $11 million for 2 years for a star quarterback, that's a great bargain. Now, he had not produced in the past, and I know a lot of fans were upset about going out there and giving the fifth-year option, that the Panthers made a mistake. I don't know if I necessarily say they made a mistake, even after having watched everything. If you're going to give up 3 picks for a player and bring him in to be your starting quarterback, you're going to need to pick up that fifth-year option. You're going to have to at least 2 years to prove that he's the guy. Now, prove very quickly that he was not the guy, and I was not surprised by that at all. But the Panthers, they took the risk. They decided, okay, let's pick up the fifth-year option, because if he plays well on a $4 million contract, then we're going to have to play the franchise tag game. That's going to be costly. You're going to extend him, and that can be complicated. So the Panthers felt like $22 million over 2 years for a starting quarterback in the NFL, bargain. Love, we'll do that. Did not work out for them. So that's a risk that they've done in the past that, based off of the compensation they gave up, it made sense in principle. I could say they did it. And I, at the time, really wasn't that upset about the fifth-year option, because if you're going to give up 3 picks, then, yeah, you need to show a level of commitment past this upcoming season for a player when you give that capital. J.C. Horn, for me, it's like, yeah, he hasn't been healthy. But I was reading, I think it was either Mike Kay or Joe Person, who were talking about, like, the fifth-year option is something that's actually going to happen. And maybe I've been looking at this wrong the whole time. Yeah, J.C. Horn's a really good player, and you would want to pick up the fifth-year option. I just wondered, do you want to do it for someone who's not been able to play? He's missed 29 of available, 51 games so far in his career. Are you really trying to invest that much into someone that we have not seen? Now, when you look at the fifth-year option, the projected fifth-year option at over cap is $12.4 million for next season. The franchise tag for corners this year is 19.8. It's projected to be $20.6 million next season. So the Panthers, if they were to pick up his fifth-year option, they would save $8.2 million if J.C. Horn is finally able to stay healthy. Or if they don't do it, they would then lose out on that $8.2 million. It's a risk to take. It's probably a risk that they're going to take because of the talent that he has, and that they've spent so many assets in trying to find a corner. C.J. Henderson didn't work out. Dante is either on his final day in Carolina in the next couple weeks, or he will be here for one final season. There is just not much in the pipeline behind C. Horn. But yeah, you would want to have him around. I don't know how much the salary cap impacts it. It's a bit, of course it plays a role, but really the factor is somebody that you believe is a franchise player, believe that you can build around. I think the Panthers believe he is. It's just they need to see him be healthy. And unfortunately, you can't just get your option after the season. You got to do it before the season. I guess they're going to do it based off of just if Joe's saying that, or it's Mike. I forget who said it. They're saying that that's probably going to happen. I don't know. I don't know how big of a risk taker I really am. I mean, I'm here in Vegas. I'm placed a single bet. So obviously not that big of a risk taker. Maybe I would be someone who'd be less willing to do it, but might make sense. So we'll see. All right, another question here from Van. Tight end needs some help in the offseason, obviously. If you're, in your opinion, what kind of tight end profile would work well? I know you mentioned Noah Fant as possibly for Seattle. Who else is a realistic option for Canales to bring in? Well, anytime there's an Iowa tight end out there, that's my profile of a tight end, someone who can catch the football, someone who's also great as far as a run blocker. I like that. Kobe Parkinson's the other guy I already mentioned earlier on the show. I mentioned also in my tight end outlook about a week or two ago here on the show. Go check it out in the playlist that we have as far as the edition evaluations grades on Locked On Panthers YouTube channel. Pat McPherson is the tight end coach. He has worked with Fant the last 2 seasons, worked with Kobe Parkinson also in Seattle. He's now here in Carolina. I would assume that one of those 2 guys is going to come to Carolina. Either Parkinson or Fant. Fant's going to be higher on the board as far as free agent tight ends. I would love to see him come here. Hayden Hurst, I don't know what's going to be his situation. Maybe they cut him. We'll see how that works out. I think that Parkinson or Fant, one of those 2 guys, will end up being here in Carolina upcoming season. All right, let me take another pause, and I'll come back and answer more of your weekly Friday mailbag questions right here on Locked On Panthers. This next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The one question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Few more questions here on the Weekly Friday Mailbag, and then we'll be out of here today. Over to Chad, who's a Gamecock fan and wants to know what my thoughts are on Xavier Legette as a draft choice. He says that Steve Smith is comparing him to DK Metcalf. Okay. Yeah, man. And he's got great physical asset. I think it was like 6'3", 225, something like that. I got to see him in person at the South Carolina-North Carolina game at Bank of America Stadium, and he had a huge day that afternoon. Did not see that coming at all. Shout out to Josh Pate, who did a good job covering college football for 24/7, and he was the guy who came out that Legette was going to have a breakout season. His numbers before the year, he had in 2019, 9 receptions, 80 yards. 2020 receptions, 113 yards. 2021, 8 receptions, 63 yards. 2022, 8 receptions, 167 yards. Then last year at South Carolina, 70 receptions, 1,255 yards, 7 touchdowns, and his average yards per catch was 17.7. Just deep red, physical speed. Legette's good, man. And it's so funny because I look at Florida State has really used South Carolina weirdly as like I'm sorry to bring this up to you, Chad, as like a minor league system. And I have a friend who's a Florida State fan. He's like, man, I can't believe we missed on Legette. Like, how did we not get that guy to come to Tallahassee this season? He's good. I'm always like weary of the guys who, like, quite honestly, weren't good for the first like 4 years of career and then all of a sudden blow up. And everybody develops differently. Absolutely understand that. But the first 4 years of his career, that you're thinking, this is not a draft pick. But after this past season, being 6'3", 227 as ESPN lists him, yeah, that's somebody worth looking at. I'm interested in Legette for sure. I'm interested. Don't really care that he played at that's like local Carolinas. That's really immaterial to me. Can he play football? And he showed this past season that he can do a lot of things, and he's got a great body to him, which I think is why you got the DK Metcalf comparisons. Was he the same player as DK in college? No. Put up a season that certainly is right there on par with what kind of DK was able to do in his time down at Oxford, where he was also sharing wide receiver room with Dawson Knox, who's got tight end, but also A.J. Brown, who's one of the better receivers in the NFL. I'm not against it. Jake asked, if the Panthers go wider in round 2, regardless of being back, is edge priority in round 3? Edge has to be a priority, whether it's going to be in free agency or it's going to be in the draft. You did a draft last year with DJ Johnson. I got to find somebody free agent to bring in. It's hard to say because it's anytime you say priority, hard to know until we go through the next couple of weeks of free agency. Like, ask me April 1st, and I can give you a better answer to this. Right now, I just don't know. Chris, is it possible that we should trade Brian Burns due to having another year since Jairo Vero is still the DC? Maybe his skill set doesn't match the system when we don't, and we need to just take a trade package. Well, Burns is one of those guys who was really advocating for the defensive staff to be back to have continuity, and I don't think the system doesn't like him. I just think he had the kind of season that he hoped to have. And there was really good numbers that were put out here by Joe Person of The Athletic the other day. The Panthers became the first team in the NFL since at least 91 didn't hold the lead for a single play in the fourth quarter. All their games that they won, the two of them were both on the walk-off field goals as time expired. Another stat, this is True Media, opposing quarterbacks dropped back on only 32.8% of their fourth quarter snaps against the Panthers. The NFL's worst percentage in the last 5 years. League-wide average was 60.6 according to True Media. Think about this. The Panthers, Bryce Young got sacked 62 times. Panthers gave up 65 sacks this season. Some of those, of course, are on Bryce Young and Andy Dalton in the one game that he played this past season. When you have to drop back as much as you are because you're always behind, teams can pin their ear back and go after you. When you're trailing all season, the Panthers, you can't really pin your ears back. The teams are running on you more than they are throwing. So how many opportunities did Brian Burns really have to get after the passer this season? Not that many. You can also say, well, in the opportunity that he had, did he play at the high enough level that is deserving of the kind of money that he wants? Maybe not this past season. But the Panthers weren't really in a situation where they could pin their ears back and get after the passer because they weren't successful. So for the team to give Brian Burns more of those opportunities, offensively, they got a better job of scoring points and being ahead. So the defense is protecting leads and able to be more aggressive than they were last season, where they're just trying to hold on for dear life. And that's really going against the run game, where they weren't great against the run all season long. Final question comes from Christian. He's assuming the Panthers have another good year on defense, and Jairo Vero is a highly sought-after commodity for head coach. Should the Panthers pursue Luke Kuechly, and try to bring him back to Carolina? His football IQ is stellar, and he could lead the locker room. Thoughts? As OC, I don't think so. I know Greg Olson was out here talking about, Tepper was interested in speaking to him about head coach job, that he would absolutely be interested in, saying that, just because he doesn't have coaching experience does not mean that he qualified to do the job because he's spent time playing in the NFL and yada, yada, yada. And I understand where he's coming from. There's a lot of jobs out there where they want you to have experience, but the only way to get experience is by actually doing it. So totally understand. If Greg's interested in coaching, then go coach. There's plenty of guys who actually want to coach, who are coaching right now, that are working to those positions where Greg wants to be on TV, wants to be a broadcaster, and he got some experience to do that. It's not like Fox just gave him the job right away. They would bring him in during the off. He was still playing to go out there and to do it. They also had him doing XFL games before he really got to do the NFL. He had to work his way there. So I think it's kind of funny how he's like, nah, man, if I got an opportunity, of course, yeah, interview, but to act like, oh, it's not so crazy for him to get the job when it's that, I don't know. Whatever. I love Greg and all that, but I roll my eyes on all that. I think I like some of the points he makes, but also it's like, okay, dude, look across the league, look at some of the issues that they have with coaches getting opportunities. And if you would step out of the booth and take a job, that would be ridiculous. As far as Luke goes, he was a scout for a year, left. It seems like he just wants to live his life, man. And I've said this on the show multiple times, just let these dudes live their lives. And I'm not saying that you're not doing that, Christian. If Luke Kuechly wants to be a part of the organization, should be DC for the Carolina Panthers, I'm sure he could probably do it, but no. Give it to somebody who actually wants to coach, someone who's actually here for the opportunities and can come in here and have success. That's not because they've coached and they have worked their way up that they'll have success, but give it to those guys. They talk about football being a meritocracy. I don't know. If Luke wants to be a part of the organization, I'm for it, just like with Cam Newton. That's great. Would love it. Panthers already have a president. That's Christy Coleman. If he wants to come in for another role and that works out, I'm for it. If Luke Kuechly wants to be a part of the organization again, which he already is, but he's just not as far as a scout or a coach, I'm for it. But to replace a Jairo Vero, no, I'm not really for that. All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. For yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. On Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm right here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. either at me or DM me to get those questions in for next week's show. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to you on Monday.